My question is, what were you thinking? Like, what were you thinking? When you got up Monday morning, what were you thinking? I just want to sleep some more. I don't want to do this. What am I going to eat? When you got up this morning, what were you thinking? I would like to sleep 10 more, but do I really want to go to this thing? What is she going to talk about anymore? I already paid. I'll go. And then, how many minutes lapsed, or seconds for that matter, between the time you woke up, swiped your alarm, and then picked up your phone and started checking social media, right? Your text messages and WhatsApp and Twitter and Facebook and Cheryl's eating carbs again. She's gonna gain weight. Really, Trish and Tom, another vacation in the Maldives? God, my life sucks. Nobody liked my post. Nobody liked my post. It was a funny post. I think it was fun. I used to be really, that wasn't really funny at all. That was really boring. I'm boring. Oh God, nobody likes me. And then when you turned on the television, what were you thinking? When you saw another mass shooting and the stock market taking a dive and a natural disaster, right? And government. And the government's a natural disaster, but and you get in your car and you go to work and you're in traffic and you're thinking of my husband or my ex, is such a pain, I wish they'd leave me alone, or stop texting and driving, you expletive, right? You get to work and you go to the computer and you turn the computer and you sit in the same chair, and then you go to the same break room, get the same style coffee, and you see the same people, and you get back to your desk and you're like, oh, my life sucks, or my job sucks. It's not your life, it's not your job, it's just this. It's just your thing. So, we live in a very physically focused world, right? We get dirty, we take a shower, we get a cavity, we go to the dentist, we go to the gym to be strong, we hopefully eat well, we try to dress nice, and we pay so much attention to our physical comfort, our physical form, our physical well-being, our physical appearance. We think so much about our physical everything, but how often do we think about what we're thinking about, right? So science suggests we have 70 to 80,000 thoughts a day. That's while we're awake. That's a lot of thoughts. Most of them are negative in nature, and most of them reside in the subconscious. So that's why we're not really fully aware of them. Because can you imagine, if every time one of these negative thoughts appeared on our clothing, I'm not smart enough, I'm not good at, we would be tearing those suckers right out. We wouldn't want anyone to see that, right? So 70,000 thoughts a day, and why is that significant? Because our thoughts literally can make us sick, but our thoughts can also make us well. So every time we have a thought of any kind, there's a reaction in the body, right? Now, if you're there's acute and chronic stress, and if you're in traffic and somebody cuts you off, you might get mad, maybe flip up the bird or swear or something, but then you get over it. That's the refractory period. That's the time between the stressful event occurs and you get over that stress response. And that's a short period, and everything's back to homeostasis, everything's fine. But science suggests that 60 to 70% of us now live in an elevated chronic state of stress, which is really scary and staggering, but really not hard to believe, right? Especially since 9/11, and the media is breaking news, high alert, and the breaking news is it might rain tomorrow, they make this breaking news about everything, but in the pharma companies trying to get to that primal fear of you're gonna die if you don't take this drug, and it's got us in this, plus the overall challenges of just having a day and being, if you've got a corporate career. So what happens when we have thoughts? When we have a positive thought, we have certain chemicals released, like dopamine, oxytocin, vasopressin, etc. And then the body has a really good feeling, and then a related emotion, a corresponding emotion. There's a signal that goes back to the brain, and the brain's all is good, everything's cool, end of story, right? But when we have negative thinking or stressful thinking, there's a very different chemical reaction. And so we all know cortisol, right? So the brain goes, release the cortisol into the body, and then the body has a not so good feeling and corresponding emotion, which signals back to the brain, we're not feeling so good, and the brain goes, psh, more chemicals, body's feeling anxiety, psh, and it's like a more redundant feedback loop. So that's what we want to control. And that's significant because when we're in that state, your brain can actually downregulate genes that trigger disease. So don't stress out about that, but just know that. So anyway, so as a coach, I hear from a lot of people, I just want to be the best version of me. And it's not this version I am, but it's this other version. And I think that's what we all want, most of us, right? But we can't get to the new version if we wake up with the same thoughts and beliefs and patterns and behaviors and attitudes and everything. And when you go to reach for a cup of coffee, your arm, before you even have the thought, your arm's already in motion because your brain knows it's just, and just like a lot of these thoughts and beliefs, it's a program running us, really, is what's happening. So I also hear something people say a lot, I just feel like there's something missing. And I say, there is. It's you. Because over time, what happens is with these thoughts and beliefs, most of them are not even true. We'll get to that in a minute, you know that. So we get our thoughts and beliefs that shape our attitudes and behaviors that kind of form this personality that we walk through life telling ourselves we are. But that may or may not be the same as the core essence of who you came here to be. And it's most likely not. Because these thoughts and beliefs are formed by the time between like the third trimester when we're in the womb and then by the age of 7. And we learn things, and when we're a child, we're walking around in a state of alpha, theta, kind of imagination mode. The brain doesn't have that analytical structure that they can process and analyze, and so we learn something, we perceive something, and the way we perceive it may not be true. We assign a definition, and that starts to get hard-coded in the circuitry. So for instance, Johnny is 5 years old, he had a spelling bee, he didn't do so great, he feels really bad, he comes over home and tells his parents I didn't do so well, and they want to set him up for success in life, right? And they know about the real world. They're like, Johnny, well, 100% next time, okay? You're gonna have to study harder, you're gonna do better. So, and Johnny feels like, oh, I'm not smart enough, I failed, I'm not good enough, they don't like me, but like whatever it is, not true, but that's what he felt in the moment. So then when Johnny does poorly in a softball game in 7th grade, or if he's in 35 years old and he gets a pink slip, those beliefs are repeated. So the thought becomes repeated until it becomes a belief, and then we form attitudes, etc. So our personality really isn't, it's just like a construct, so there's this tug over time of our lives of this person that we walk around being in that true essence. And so we're able to close that gap. Now, our beliefs are really hard-coded into our circuitry by the time we're 30 or so, but it doesn't take 30 years to undo it. You definitely can rewire your brain. Now, I thought I was a positive person up until my injury, and now when I look back, I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, I had like this edge, I was like super stressed all the time, I was, and I was a high-functioning professional, but I was also like teaching yoga and cycling 350 miles a week and running 70 miles a week. And if it had physical activity involved, I was all in, but I had to still do my career, and I was a basket case. I didn't even realize how much of a basket case. So my story really started 5 years ago. So I was at the gym, I had just finished like an 8-mile run, and I thought, it's a great day, I don't have to, it's a long weekend, it was July 3rd at noon, and beautiful sunny day, and I thought, well, I'm just gonna go to the gym and do some seated lat pull downs, where you sit down and you pull the bar overhead. So I had about 80 pounds loaded, and I don't remember how many pulls I did, but on one of the pulls, the pulley snapped, and the weights went down one way, and the bar came down my head with a force of 80 pounds. So it twisted and tilted, rotated and tilted my axis. I had neck injury. And because I was in the seated position, it caused this hyper shifting in my low lumbar spine, and then that in turn resulted in the formation of a cyst on my spinal cord. So, and plus I was just mush.
You were what?
Mush.
Okay.
I was mush. So I couldn't get into. I called my doctor, who was a concussion specialist, and she said, "Do you have a headache? The worst headache of your life?" I said, "No." She said, "Are you vomiting?" I said, "No." And she said, "Well, monitor yourself, and if either of those two things happen, get to the hospital. Otherwise, we'll see you first thing Saturday." Now, if I were in my right mind, I would have maybe gone to the hospital, but my head was already the size of a grapefruit and growing, and I literally could feel like my brain, when initial contact, I felt the inside like a snow globe. So I guess I monitored myself, but when they did the first set of impact tests, I don't know how many tests there were, but all of them except one were 0% cognition. One came in at 5%.
Holy cow.
I remember.
How did you even get to the hospital?
I don't know how I got anywhere, to be honest with you. And it was just me and my dog. I was new to the area, so I didn't have friends. I didn't have supportive relationships. I didn't know anyone. And my job required I traveled a ton. So I was always on the road 4 or 5 days a week. So I had to learn how to ask for help really fast to complete strangers. And the people that I did know, like through the gym or whatever, those are the people who said, "Oh yeah, we'll be by," and crickets. The complete strangers were the ones that brought groceries to my house, walked my dog for me. Like, it was amazing. So I don't know how like I get choked up, but I do. I remember being in the doctor's office the first day, and she went out of the room, and I was looking around, and I see a computer, I see a desk, I see like a patient. I'm like, where am I? I had no idea where I was, but I knew that a minute ago I knew where I was. I remember one time, like, I didn't even know my name. I didn't know where I lived. Like, if I saw you guys, I would have been like, are you my sister or my cousin or a barista at Starbucks? Like, I knew, I would know that you look familiar, but I don't know who you are. So I wasn't allowed any stimulation, no light, no music, no sound, no phone, no nothing for several weeks. So
Was your balance off?
Oh, I was a fall risk. No, I had to hang on. Even just the walls, like even just walking, I had to be near a wall. And stairs, oh my God, sometimes I would just like sit down one and crawl to, because you had to go up a thing of stairs to get to my living space. So those first initial weeks, it was just me, I'm gonna sit for a minute, me just in my thoughts. And I realized, and I think, not having all the supportive relationships for me was a blessing, because I know people, I've talked to brain injury support groups, and I know people that are like very well-intentioned friends and family are constantly saying, well, you should do that, and you should do that, and go get a lawyer, and you should do, and it's really, this just needs to, shh. And it's hard to, I can imagine it would be hard to try to like process all that and think about it when you really just need to not think at all for a long time. So I realized in the first month, my medical bills were already like $25,000, and I had no idea the severity because this wasn't working, right? So, but I did realize that my sisters or parents would call from Connecticut and try to say how I was doing, or friends from up north, and they would oftentimes just start yelling about how mad I should be and this horrible thing, and I could feel like my head swell, the pressure, the head pain, and the eye pain, and the dizziness, and the nausea, and the fanning, and all, like and if I thought of my medical bills, I'd get reconcussed. So that was a blessing, because I knew very quickly that if my body's gonna heal, I'm gonna have to really heal this first. This is gonna be a paramount. I don't know why, but that became crystal clear intuitively that this was gonna have to heal first. And then I realized, so I would think when something negative came into my field, I would replace it with like me sitting at the ocean staring at the waves, or like, like puppies when they have that puppy ear smell. I would think of holding a puppy with his little puppy ear smell, and like, so stupid, but things that literally gave me joy in my body, not just up here, but that I could feel all through me. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, I don't have to wait for something negative. I can deliberately select what I want to think about in any given moment, right? And that was like mind blowing, even that. So then I just started developing all these tricks and tools for it was fun for me, and I could tell like I was calming down a lot. And so when I was able to walk, I would start listening to people like Abraham Hicks, and she had these rampages of appreciation. So I created this thing called Alphabet Soup, where you just start with I would start by thanking the universe and my place in it, and then I would just start with the letter A, and I would say, words of appreciation, appreciation, and thank you for appreciating, thank you for bestowing and clarifying, and on and on and on to Z, and so that I just began to develop these tools and tricks. And 2 years into the process, I turned on YouTube, and because I wanted to find. Well, first of all, 6 months later, they were like, all right, we think you're well enough to go back to work. And this was me walking down the hall, because I always had to hold papers because I had to be close to the wall. But I knew that at one point I'd be like doing that, and but if anyone was coming, I'd be like, just reading this report. And then one day, they had a meeting and everybody was congregating in the kitchen for a break, and I went up to this woman. I was like, "Hey, I know we've seen each other before, but I'm Lynn. I don't think we've met." And she goes, "Lynn, it's Nancy, CFO." I went routinely to meetings with her for the last 3 years. So, and then I told somebody I have to go buy cheese. I didn't eat dairy, and I was terrified to go out in public because I thought, what if I pee in public, or what if I take my shirt, what if I just start disrobing, what if I say something inappropriate, because my brain was still not. And so then a weird thing happened at work where I started to be uninvited to meetings, and I said to my boss, something's going on, and if they're thinking of firing me, that'll be a wrongful discharge and I'll sue. Well, a few weeks later, he went to the CEO to try to figure out his raise because he was getting promoted. And they told him he had to leave the bank. I was taking his job. I couldn't even do mine. So I think what happened is that got to the top. But anyway, so 2 years later, I'm driving down to wherever I was going, and I'm like, I want to find something on YouTube, and I turn on. Are you guys familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just heard this name yesterday.
He had a horrible, tragic accident when he was 21 in a cycling leg by triathlon. They said, you're going to be in a body cast for a year, you'll never walk again. And he was like, oh, hell no. If I can heal myself and walk out of this hospital, I'm dedicating my life to neuroscience. So I'm listening to him, and he's explaining the neuroscience behind why all these tricks that I developed for myself were actually working. And then I was like, wait a minute. If that worked for me, and now there's neuroscience behind this, that can work for so many people. And so in this process, I began to close that gap of this personality and my true self. And it was the most powerful thing in the world. And then one day I was going down to, I think, Wilmington, and I literally, this feeling of joy washed completely over me. And it was the most amazing feeling, yet it was so unfamiliar, but at the same time it felt really natural. And I was having a tough time because I don't know what to do with this, but I know that's how I'm supposed to feel, right? And it was just a bizarre incongruity, but I decided that I'm gonna milk this as long as I possibly can so I can have a record in it in my body so that I could recall it. And I did, and it worked. So that began to become one of my practices I did every day. So, and I listened incessantly to Dr. Joe, and then I would try to repeat that to someone else and tell someone else about it. So, when we hear people say, change your thoughts, change your life, they're missing something, because it's more than that. I mean, you can say affirmations all day long, but you gotta have that aligned, heightened, elevated emotion that is aligned with whatever intention you're trying to create in your life. That's where the change takes place. So in my book, I talk about the 6 impact imperatives, and awareness is always number one, and awareness is huge because, you know, I had a client a few weeks ago and she said, I'm 100% aware of all my thoughts. And I know, in my head I was, but okay. And it's impossible. It's impossible. We have 70, 80,000 thoughts a day, and they're most in the subconscious. How on earth this program is running us, right? So, about 20 minutes into that meeting, she started crying, like out of nowhere. She just started crying, and I said, "Oh my God, what just happened?" She said, "I don't know." I said, "Take a deep breath, close your eyes. What were you thinking about?" And she has a very sick husband, and her thoughts went over to, "How am I going to change him?" And she knows she can't. And it just, but so little things like that. And you know, and then she asked me to help her with her tennis game, and I'm like, I don't think that's my forte, but I mean, in theory, these principles should apply, right? She hadn't won in a tiebreaker in 4.5 months. So within the first week after those few exercises, she already won 3 or 4 tiebreakers. So she's on top of the world. But so anyway, it's more than just change your thoughts, change your life. So awareness is number one. And the 2 biggest things for gaining awareness, for me anyway, of these limiting thoughts and beliefs are when you have a somatic response. If there is a lot of anxiety, like out of nowhere, take a step back and try to figure out what were you just thinking about, and what are you afraid of? Like, you know, for me one day, I just had all this anxiety, and I knew it was related to the deadline. I was, you know, at this bank, and it wasn't. We had just merged into this new bank. I had a wonderful new boss, and I was terrified. And I was like, "Why are you so afraid?" And I just like had this little what if. So, well, I might miss the deadline. So what? Oh, so what? Not what if. So what? Well, then they might not like me. So what? Well, then they might fire me. So what? Well, then I'd be out of a job. So what? I won't have a paycheck. So what? Then I won't have a place to live. And we went right back down to that primal fear of I'll be alone and unloved, you know? And then I reality test. Have you ever missed a deadline? No. If you did miss this deadline, would they fire you? Probably not. Okay, so it was all this anxiety building and building on a false perception, right? So somatic responses and meditation. Meditation was huge in my healing on so many levels, but good at keeping us calm, but also good at really helping me identify those thoughts that were filtering through on a daily basis. So that's always number one, and then the other 5 impact imperatives are continued learning and repetition. And those are like really the creative centers in your brain are like, what do we have to work with? And then the repetition is really what gets those neural pathways reestablished, right? The rewiring, because there's neurons that fire together, wire together. So you always have to have as much as possible. And there were times, you guys who read the book, you know that there were times when I couldn't be in appreciation because I was in so much pain. But trying to be in a state of appreciation, that is like the purest form of reception that you can be in. And in so many ways, you're receptive to your own change, you're receptive to a higher power, and it's the highest vibrations, period. You can't be in growth and change if you're in negativity and contraction. So let's see, we got awareness, continued learning, repetition, elevated emotion. Appreciation, elevated emotion. It's one thing. I mean, you can say affirmations all day long. That's not going to change anything. But if you can pair an intention or an affirmation with a feeling in your body, that if you can feel that in your body, that's where real change occurs. Now, sometimes it's really hard for people, right? So they're like, "Oh, I think I want to be this, but I really can't feel that." Then start a little more general. Don't go all the way there. Maybe you can't get there from where you are. So it's a shift, you know, and you just got to figure out how to shift. So in this process, like I said, I closed that gap, and I really felt like I'm in my truth now, and I'm walking my power that I came here to be this. I really feel like this is why I'm here. But the point is, we've just like given our power away in society, and this whole thing, just interesting, fun science, you guys, 5 times. So So, the conventional wizards, two things that are still out in the textbooks that aren't even true. So one, predeterminism, right? That your genes are gonna tell you what diseases you're gonna get. That was a theory in 1958 and it got into the textbooks about 10 years later. And it's not that it's totally untrue, but it's not, the vast majority of how we get to illness is through our lifestyle, the choices we make, and things we choose to put in our bodies, and what are those behaviors based on? Those beliefs, right? So, we've had 40 years of science to show that this new science is true, but it'll probably never get back in the textbooks. And also about 40 or 50 years ago, they started taking the DNA out of cells just to see what would happen when you thinking that the DNA is the brain of the cell. So when you take a brain out of an organism, what's the consequence? Death, right? But no, the cells kept functioning. So they're like, well, what is the brain? And they just discovered that the brain is actually the membrane, like the skin, for lack of a better word, of a cell. So the skin's membrane senses something. This is oversimplified, but the skin's membrane senses something in the environment and sends a signal into the protein receptors. And then those receptors interpret that, and based on their interpretation, react. So essentially, the life of a cell is based on its perception of and reaction to its environment. Isn't that what we do? Right? So that's my spiel. I'm glad I'm here to tell it. And if you have any questions or...
So what is it you do?
So what does I do? So I coach. I'm a health coach. I'm no longer in banking. But I do health coach. And my whole thing is when I first sit down with someone, I want to know like where this is at. Because some people understand this intuitively. Like a good friend of mine, he gets this. But he would not be able to explain why or how. We know that if we turn that switch on, light's going on. Get it going, right? So a lot of people just intuitively get this and they're in the right frame of mind. But like with my client the other day said, I'm 100%. I knew right there that that's where we're starting. Or if someone comes to me at a consult and they say, well, I've done this before, it didn't work then, so I don't think it's gonna work. Okay, we gotta get right to that, because whatever the goal is, if you wanna lose 10 pounds, or if you wanna meditate more, or manage your pain, or if there's something in here blocking it that's saying it's gonna be too much work, it's gonna be too hard, or I don't think I can do this. And I even warn people, in a couple weeks you're gonna say, I don't think I can do this, because that's the brain saying, I don't like change, and what happens is the brain gets to a place where it's like, and it says it gives us funny things, like, I don't have to start today, I can start tomorrow. I can just have this one piece of pie, it's not gonna hurt me. Or, really, really manipulative, the brain, I love myself with all my flaws, just as I am, so I don't have to change. This feels right. No, it's not that it feels right, it feels familiar. And so it's really important to understand the difference, right? And how important is it? Like, for me, I had no choice. I knew I was not going back to who I was before. I didn't want this stress. And I remember one day, I think I read about it in the book. One day I was driving to work and I just had so much anxiety, and I was thinking, I hate my job. But then I realized the concussion, the injury, had created so much negativity surrounding the whole idea of going to work, because I was dizzy when I drove. I was nauseous when I drove. I had to pull over for 25. Like I could only drive so many hours a day, so I had to stay in hotels, and that was and I had like 12. I don't even know 10 or 12. I don't know specialist appointments every week, and like my hotel bills were like $1,600 a month or $1,200 a month, and my specialist bills were another $15, whatever it was. And the guy for the vision, he was is it Wake Forest Road up in North Rhode? He was awesome, Dr. Peters. I mentioned very few people by name in the book, but I mentioned him because he was outstanding. I have to get myself to that office, drive back roads, so I wouldn't be too dizzy. They would do these exercises for me, for like an hour, and I would go sit in the parking lot for 3 hours because I was so nauseous. And I'd have to wait for that to pass, because if I were to drive, it's already got momentum, it might get worse. So long way around did I answer the original question.
So do people come to you or do you come to us?
Oh, people come to me, or I mean, if I know that you could benefit, then I would go to you for sure. But yeah.